My guest this morning is Shontaye, also known as, quote, Taye, unquote, is an alumnus of Morgan State University and received her Master's of Science degree in Communication Disorders from William Paterson University. She is a certified speech-language pathologist and founder of Having Our Say LLC, where her private therapy practice focuses on evaluating and providing therapy to children with communication disorders. She also produces a blog for parents and caregivers providing tips and resources to help enhance language development in children. Shontaye's dedication to children with special needs has a global reach as she serves as an executive board member for Smiles for Speech Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that provides services and resources to children from disadvantaged communities across the globe. Through her speaking engagements and presentations, she has presented to over 15,000 professionals on the importance of diversity and inclusivity in children's literature. Her commitment to supporting language development, literacy, and increasing diversity in children's literature has now led to the completion of her first children's book, Liam's First Cut. Written under the pen name of Taye Jones, Shontaye weaves together the beauty of fatherhood, community, and neurodiversity as Liam, an autistic black boy, approaches a day he's been anticipating for quite some time. Taye gives readers a glimpse at how Liam prepares for his first visit to the barbershop. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Taye Jones, also known as Shontaye Glover. So Shontaye, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for rising early to join me. Now, let me get this. Would you rather for me to address you as Taye or for Shontaye?
Shontaye is fine.
Shontaye is fine. All right, Shontaye it is.
Yes.
See, I have a pet peeve of mine is names. I like to call people by what they want to be called by. So if Shontaye is it, Shontaye it shall be. So again, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And I thank Reverend Aisha Taylor Asaf for introducing us through email informally and and the way things are going with the pandemic. I guess we only see each other now on Zoom or Google or email.
Yes, that is the way of our world these days.
It is. And so, again, I think as we were sharing, prior to coming on air, our paths probably have crossed if you've been at the church at all. Our paths have crossed. So if we get a chance to, when we get back in there again, if you happen to be there, we'll get to meet each other face to face at some point. But yeah,
that would be wonderful.
I am thrilled. Whenever Reverend Aisha sent me the email saying she had a friend who wrote a book, I immediately said, well, get me her information so she can come on my show. And then if we come up with some things to do beyond that, by all means, we'll see if we can make anything happen there. But the first step here is let folks know about your book and everything. So one of my first questions is, because I'm looking at your bio, which I just read and everything, and just kind of want to work our way up to how did you wind up getting in this field in terms of like the speech language pathologist? Or, because it's kind of like those are one of those fields. It's not something that you hear kids say, that's what I want to do when I grow up. so kind of work us through how did you get there, and then to the point where it's led you to do the other things that we talked about in the bio, and ultimately the writing of a book.
Sure, I would be happy to answer those for you. I probably always felt like I enjoyed children, and I remember taking a lot of time to try to figure out what's my purpose, what's my passion, and everything that I always did related to somehow trying to work with children to make their lives better. And when I was thinking about doing my graduate study, I came across someone who was actually a speech-language pathologist. And as she talked more to me about the field, I felt like me as a person who celebrates children and their abilities, this was the perfect job for me. A lot of people don't even know what a speech-language pathologist does, but what we do, we help individuals, and not just children. We help individuals across the age spectrum with their communication and their speaking language skills, as well as swallowing. So it's a very diverse, a very dynamic field. There's a lot that you can do, and we wear several hats. I have been mostly in the pediatric space probably for the last almost 15 years, I think, where I've been working exclusively with children. Not that I don't enjoy the adults, but that's where I find that I am most rewarded. I'm most passionate about working with children. And within that phase of working with children, I started using books a lot in my therapy and in my intervention. But my books that I was using in therapy didn't always reflect the students that I was working with. Conversely, I also felt like I didn't have books to expose other children to different cultures, to different experiences and different races. So I wanted to do something about that. I started thinking about children who encounter classmates who ask them questions about their hair or ask them questions about their skin or make assumptions because they look different. And obviously, I can't bring a lot of folks from different cultures and different races into a classroom setting. But what I can do is expose you to people through books, because books are those mirrors, they're windows, and those sliding glass doors. And that's when I started being very intentional about the books that I use in my literacy-based therapy with my students.
It's interesting because this morning, one of the songs that came up on air prior to me going on the air was It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas. And as I was listening to the song and I was listening to the lyrics, what came to me was the line where the singer was saying the kids' names. And he said Barney and Ben and Janice and Jen. And for some reason, what popped into my mind, I said, I wonder if we were to sing that song with African-American names or names that are usually associated with African-American, like Raheem or what have you, I wonder how that would change. Because, I mean, it was just Barney and Ben, Janice and Jen. And then I thought about the fact that we were going to be doing Liam's first cut. And the reason I'm saying that was based on what you just said about not having books that reflected your student population. A lot of what we do in terms of whether it's music, unless we're listening to our music, so or a lot of times we're not reflecting. Now that has gotten better over the years, because they're absolutely, at the time that I was just telling you about with that song, Barney and Ben, Janice and Jen, they're absolutely not. In 2020, it has gotten better, but we're still not where we need to be. So that's the importance of a book such as Liam's First Cut. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to that. But just the significance of the fact that you focused on the barber shop. That is a major experience in the African-American community. So everything connects, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit. Because now, okay, you kind of given me a history as to you always loved kids, and you went down, and let me help you understand something. Because when I'm not doing radio, my profession is being a school principal. So I have been working with all age groups of kids from pre-K. Usually my experience is to 8. I haven't done secondary school. I haven't done the high school. But I've been working from pre-K to 8 for my career in education. And let me tell you, in terms of reading and communications, that if our kids, and this cuts across the board, whether African-American kids, Caucasian kids, if children in general don't get the communication and the literature and the reading thing, they're not going to get the rest of the subjects.
Correct. Absolutely not. And if they don't see an interest in reading, I think Scholastic said it's by the age of 9. If children don't really enjoy reading for fun, then they're probably not going to develop that love for reading. And reading will always feel like a chore for them. And when children have difficulties with reading, it crosses over every subject area. So those literacy skills are super important, and there's something that speech-language pathologists, especially in a school setting, can be helpful with as well, and work on those skills in the space of the therapy and help to make sure that carries over to the classroom and work on whatever is going on in the curriculum as well.
So I'll tell you what, let's help the listening audience and myself. I'm in education, so I kind of get it, but this is what you do. Let's help the listening audience understand what exactly is a communication disorder.
So a communication disorder can encompass something as simple as a person has difficulty with producing full sentences. So when you're thinking of a younger child, there are always milestones, right? We have milestones for when we look for our child to walk for the first time, when they should be sitting up, when they should be crawling. There are also language milestones, and we're looking to make sure that a child meets all of those milestones within a relatively typical range. you should be speaking your first word by a certain time, starting to put words together and have longer and longer sentences. A communication disorder is when there's something impaired with that system. So it could be that you're not speaking long enough phrases soon enough. It could be that your sentences are fragmented and you don't have a good understanding of the use of grammar. It could be something where your cognitive skills are impacting your communication and your memory is affected. It also can impact your social skills and how you interact with others. And that usually is more related to someone that has a neurological issue. So maybe you don't understand the jokes, you don't understand inferences, those subtle little hints that someone's saying to you, and you're unable to read between the lines. That's another form of a language, another form of a communication disorder. It ranges. It can be more profound. There are some children who then go on to be adults as well, who are completely nonverbal, meaning that they cannot use words to communicate, and they rely on a device possibly to help them communicate their needs and their wants. Obviously, there are those folks who are hearing impaired, but they're able to communicate through the language of signs. But if you have a disorder, there's something impaired about your ability to communicate with other folks, and that's where we come in to help you be able to communicate with others more functionally.
See, that's interesting. Now, do you statistically or from research based or what have you, which way are we moving? Are we seeing a higher percentage of kids who are now struggling with that, or is the number decreasing?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's actually decreasing. I think that the number of children who are getting earlier intervention, that number is improving. Okay. So there's a lot more awareness now where folks are recognizing that I think my child's not developing at the appropriate rate, and they're seeking out assistance earlier, whereas for a long time people would take the wait and see approach. You may have heard folks say things like, oh, I remember my son didn't talk until he was 5. That's not normal, folks.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. And you hit on a very good point. And that's the whole notion of awareness. A lot of the things that have come into play now, or into our knowledge or our understanding, years ago, folks had no idea what it was. And like you just said, they just kind of thought, okay, that my second child or my first child, it just took them that long. But no, it was something that was actually going on. There's a couple of examples I'll give to that. For those of you out there who are Steelers fans, as long as I've been, then you would know the quarterback back in the 70s was Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw right now is on the air. He does the commentating. But Terry Bradshaw had dyslexia, and no one knew it. They just thought he was stupid, not realizing that it was the dyslexia. The man was actually brilliant, especially in terms of football, because he'll be one of the first ones to tell you, hey, look, I won 4 Super Bowls, and I call my own plays. The coaches were not putting in plays from the sidelines. I call my own plays, but yet everybody still thinks I'm stupid. They didn't realize until years later that he suffered from dyslexia. My second example of that would be folks who stammer, and I've dealt with that because my mom stammered for a long time, and it was because of a neurological issue based on the fact that in her days, whenever she was young, they thought being left-handed was evil. So what her father did was, when she was a little girl, was tied her left hand behind her and forced her to use her right hand. That crossed up the brain, which caused her to stammer. Over time, she was able to overcome the stammering. But I'm saying all that to say is there are a lot of issues that go on, one, that we didn't know about. And then over time, through more research and everything else, we do know about. And so we're able to address it. So it may not be an issue whereas the numbers are increasing or decreasing. It's just that cases we may not have known about years ago, we now do know about. So that makes it look like the number is higher.
Yeah. And I didn't mention stuttering, but that's also something that speech-language pathologists work on with their clients as well. And for a long time, people assume that if a person stuttered, that was an indication of their intelligence.
Correct.
And they may not have worked on improving that as well. So, like you said, with more awareness, people are seeking out intervention and working on improving all of these areas. Even voice therapy, that's another area that we go into. So sometimes folks have issues with their voice, you're a person who uses your voice as an instrument professionally. But if you don't take care of it, it can lead to problems where your voice is hoarse, or you could have no voice. So we talk more about hygiene and preventive care, and we're probably seeing more folks take better care of their voices as a result.
Correct. Now, because the one thing that I love about what you're doing is you're combining the whole issue of communication disorder also with reading and literature. And where I'm coming from as a principal, I see kids every day that have absolutely no communication disorders whatsoever, yet they can't read to save their lives for whatever reason. So I'm saying all that to say reading is a challenge even for someone who does not have communication disorder. What is it now for someone who does have a communication disorder who now is also struggling with trying to get the concept of reading and comprehension and decoding, so forth and so on?
Well, language does have a lot to do with reading, and depending on what that child's issue is, it could be, you might have to go all the way back and take a look at how well, I don't want to get too technical, but their phonological skills. And often that piece is missing. So they're unable to understand that when you're looking at a word, how those sounds blend together.
Right.
And they're unable to blend those, or they have difficulty with segmenting. And we may have to go back and work on those skills. So that's something else that SLPs do, and does fall within the realm of having a communication delay. And it depends on what exactly is happening with that. So it could be that they're not understanding, they're not comprehending what they're reading or what's being read to them too. So that's another skill where we have to work on and break it down so that they are understanding not just a lot of kids have good reading fluency, so they can read the words, but they have no idea what they just read.
Correct.
So that's another issue as well.
That's the issue I think I faced with the most. I mean, a lot of times I would get my students, Mr. Medley, I know how to read. Okay, what did you just read? Then they can't tell me. And so that's why I always make the difference between decoding versus comprehension. I just had this conversation with my teachers yesterday. There is a major league difference between decoding, and many of my children struggle with even decoding, because this is the other thing too. The decoding will impact your comprehension. So if you're reading and you have to stop at every other word because you can't call it, or like you said, your phonemic awareness, you don't know what that word is. If you have to keep breaking your reading because of that, there's no way you're going to comprehend, because your focus was on trying to figure out that word and not on what the author said. So yeah, now something you said a minute ago is the frustration of many teachers. And this is why even the training and the awareness of teachers is so critical. A lot of times teachers don't realize especially when you got a class full of kids, and a lot of them are suffering from some of the things that you just mentioned. It is a source of frustration, because from the teacher's mind, it's like, I don't understand why this kid is not getting it. I'm teaching. They're not getting it. They're not getting. A lot of times they're not getting it. It's because of some of these things that you mentioned, but that would be unbeknownst to a teacher. So at what point do they get sent to you? Is it because they're referred? Does a teacher refer them? Does a parent refer them? How do they finally figure it out that, you know what, something's going on here? I need to see a speech language pathologist.
It unfortunately is probably later, and it might be because of something totally unrelated, like that they are realizing this child's pronunciation of words isn't as clear as I'd like for it to be. And then if you have a really good SLP and she really does her job with her assessing, she'll realize that it's way more than that. But a lot of times in the school setting, the teachers and the administrators don't recognize all of the roles that the SLP can play and how they can help a classroom teacher and help in the classroom setting. It is helpful if you have therapists who are educating the teachers and letting them know, like, hey, guys, listen, I can help you with that as well. Oftentimes, the referral does come from the teacher. But if the teacher doesn't realize that I can refer to you for this, then a lot of time is missed. So, again, I advocate a lot for school-based SLPs to educate the teachers and let them know what you work on and that you should be a part of that team. Talk to your Title I teachers, your reading specialists, your classroom teachers about what you know about literacy, and how you can help if they're seeing particular signs with the students. On the child study team, which is when you're starting to make those referrals for children you think need special education services, the child study team includes a learning specialist. So if the learning specialist gets a hold of the student or the referral and finds out this information, they may also be the one to say, let's pull in the speech pathologist too, because she or he may be helpful with what we're seeing here. Occasionally, we do get referrals from doctors, from pediatricians, or even neurologists, but typically it's for something more neurologically based. So a child may have had some behavioral issues, some attention issues, or is just really far off on the development schedule. So they're making more of a recommendation globally based upon what they're not seeing. When it comes to something that's like reading, that would need to come from the teacher. So I would say hopefully teachers and school-based SLPs are building better relationships so teachers understand when they should be referring to the speech-language pathologist.
Now, in terms of, again, and I'm not sure which audience or population you may see, but I tend to look at a lot of things, probably most things, and what I consciously try to do is look through them through an Afrocentric lens. And unfortunately, any negative number usually of African Americans lead in. Anything that's negative, we're the top in it, or anything that we ought to be top in, we're bottom in. Do you find, in terms of children with speech disorders, do you find it cultural or racial, or is it about the same regardless if they're Caucasian, African American, Indian, Asian, whatever? Or is it kind of like the same across the board, or do you find that you wind up having more, because I refuse to use the term minority, but I mean, in terms of, do you find more non-Caucasian students who suffer from these disorders, or is it about the same?
I like to use the word minoritized because we've been put into that space. No, it's not that. Quite about. It's we're often diagnosed later or not diagnosed. It's often looked at as simply a behavioral problem or quote unquote being lazy before looking at that there's really something going on. There's something underlying that's causing the student to have difficulties. So yes, there is a difference.
You see, and that's where what you just said, because first off, the stereotype with African American is lazy. So that's the first leap. Mm-hmm. So let's say, for example, you do now have, and I'm just painting a picture for folks, you have now like a young Caucasian teacher that has a class full of African American kids. And you've already been steeped in, just in your background, the stereotype of African Americans. And I know nobody's going to say that up front, but subconsciously, African Americans are lazy. So now you're teaching kids who are not getting what you're teaching, and the first leap is they're lazy. They're just not doing their work because they're lazy, when that's not the case, that there's more going on. And I'm saying all that today for those in the listening audience. Please look beyond the fallback of, oh, the kid's just not getting it because he's lazy or because she's lazy, because that's not always the case. And again, in terms of, I mean, it's kind of like a balancing act. On the one hand, you don't want every teacher automatically classifying or trying to refer everybody for testing, but at the same time, give some thought beyond they're lazy or they're stupid or they're dumb or this, because it could be something. I asked, literally, I had this question yesterday with my with my child study team, and I had my speech therapist on the line, and we did a Zoom meeting yesterday, and that was one of my questions on a couple of kids we were talking about. All right, is this something neurological? Help me understand, is this something neurological going on, or is it having to do with the home environment, or they're just not doing the homework, or just, so, you know, as we were talking, absenteeism came up, home life came up, as well as in a couple of the kids, it was definitely something neurological going on. So I'm saying all that, questions like that have to be asked. Is there something going on neurologically? Is there a reason like this child can't do it, and it can't just always be because the child is lazy? So that as soon as you said that word, it immediately leaped up at me. And a lot of times that leap is made instead of looking a little deeper to see, is there something else going on? And yes, I honestly believe, which kind of leads us in the next couple of minutes to Liam's first cut, because a lot of times what's going on culturally, depending on what your culture is versus who you're teaching, if you don't understand each other, that could cause an issue. And that's why Liam's first cut to me is so important. And we said it early, kind of like in our preamble or our introduction or in our first remarks, in terms of I was coming across books that just did not reflect the students I was serving. And that's an issue only because for so many different reasons in terms of child's self-esteem, child's understanding, child wanting to understand, and everything else, because I'm really big on trying to help folks connect the dots. I really am. And for many of our children, the dots don't connect because they're looking at something that doesn't look like them, and they're saying, but that's not me. That name doesn't sound like me. That's why I was teasing you about the Barney and Ben, Jennifer and Jen, Jan and Jen, whatever. You have Liam, which is clearly that's a different type name. That's not your usual Sue and Jane and Karen and Kim, and it's not that. It's a name clearly that stands out and is more culturally based. So let's now go on into that, since we started that and we've kind of given folks a history of disorders and what you serve. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use reading, and particularly a book that you wrote, in what you do. So first off, where did the concept and you heard me say earlier that the experience, the fact that she focused on the barber shop, even that is significant and intentional. So where did this all come from? Where did, you were seeing that there wasn't many things out there or resources you can use that reflected the kids that you served. What did you now, Shontaye, say in terms of, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a book.
So I didn't mention this earlier, but I am a mom. And in addition to recognizing how deficient my therapy library was, when I would come home, I realized how intentional I had been with the selection of books that I was reading to my daughters. And I would always look for books that would encourage them, that would inspire them, that would make them feel seen and important and improve their self-esteem. So we had those books. We had books about hair. We had books about skin tone. And usually I would look for a book in particular because of something that they may have experienced. So I remember my older daughter having issues where a lot of girls didn't have hair like hers. So I looked for books that talked about different hair textures. And when I would think about it, I said, well, why don't I have books like this in my therapy room? And I started doing some research, and I realized that it wasn't by accident. It wasn't an accident that most of the books that I use professionally feature animals or feature white main characters. That's just the way that the publishing industry is set up. And most children's books that are published don't feature a black or brown character as the protagonist. So I had to be intentional. I didn't realize it. I thought I was just being intentional because I wanted to do this for my daughters, but I had to be intentional anyway if I wanted to find those types of books, those types of stories, and those types of characters. And now I found that I need to have that same intentionality for my work. And in doing that, looking for authors who were black or of color, looking for stories that featured black children, I started to feel like maybe I could write my own story. And I had been invited to ghostwrite a book with someone, but that plan fell apart. So when someone started asking me, well, what about you? Do you have a book? Because you're highlighting all of these other authors. We'd love to see your book. The idea for Liam came to me. And it all happened pretty organically. I like to believe, and I tell folks, I think that everything lined up just perfectly. I think this is just what God wanted me to do in this next phase of my life. The idea for the barbershop and for Liam going to get his haircut came about because I realized there were so many books for girls that celebrated girls and their hair, but there weren't as many for boys. And it's important that we also talk about that experience of going for your haircut for the first time. I talked to many men who remembered vividly taking their sons or their nephews, their grandsons, their mentee, or taking someone to the barbershop for the first time, and it was a very memorable moment. And I felt like I want to share that too. There were a lot of things that I wanted to show through this book, and I wanted to focus on the relationship between black fathers and their sons. I wanted to focus on that special moment, that bond between the family, because I don't talk a lot about Liam's mom, but there is a mom present. I wanted to show that intact family unit as well. And, of course, I wanted to talk about the barbershops. Barbershops are important to me, even though, I'm not a person who had frequently gone to the barbershop to get my own haircut, but my brother is a barber, and I would often go to his barbershop just to hang out with him. And I've always enjoyed that atmosphere. I could sit and people watch all day. There's always so much going on, so much fellowship and friendship, and your barbers truly do become a part of your family. My brother also has experience with having cut children who have autism. And a lot of times with his autistic clients, he says how important it is that parents have a relationship with him and have that conversation. Just let me know so that I know I need to be a bit more patient, so I know what to expect, and I can help walk them through the process so they know what to expect. And all of that just came together with my idea to produce this book.
So again, I keep referring to the barbershop because it's funny, and you've been to St. Luke, so you know Reverend Clayton, but he declares out, if you really want to know what's going on in the African-American community, go either to the hair salon or the barbershop. That's where you really can get what's going on in the community. And for the African-American community, that is the place where, it's more than just about getting your hair styled or getting your hair cut. It is really about the socialization. It's all about, going there, having good conversation. It's almost like, to a degree, where people kind of like the barber or the hairstylist is almost just like the bartender. It's like same type deal where folks go and they get a chance to, again, hang out, be social, what have you. So for the African-American experience, that is significant. That's why I know for a fact, and see, I did say that during my daily job, I'm a principal, but what I didn't say was the school that I'm principal of is an all-boys school. I have a single gender school, all boys. It's not an alternative school, it's a leadership school. And it's predominantly African-American, Hispanic. I have a couple of Middle Eastern kids, but most of them are either Hispanic or African-American. And I am dogmatic on making sure those boys understand their ethnicity, their culture, their background, where they come from, what their experiences are, and how they differ. One of the things I try to, and has become my mantra since I read it, and it's by Naeem Akbar. And one of the things he says, which, like I said, it truly has become my mantra, and I've referenced it a few times in different venues. But what he said was, quote, "We must learn to comfortably celebrate ourselves. Self-celebration does not necessitate the degradation of others," unquote. Matter of fact, I love this so much, I put it on our school webpage. It's on there. We must learn to comfortably celebrate ourselves. Self-celebration does not necessitate the degradation of others. One of my fraternity's brothers, who's long passed on now, used to say, because I am pro-black does not necessarily mean I'm anti-white. So when I start having discussions like this in terms of you creating a book that has a name such as Liam, that emphasizes the African-American experience, the barbershop, that emphasizing, like you said, boys, because we do have a lot for girls, but in terms of boys, yes, we do need more that directly associates and affirms and helps African-American males have an experience too, because I'm quite sure it wouldn't be that hard to find a book such as yours with a Caucasian boy who's going skiing. Quite sure, or golfing, or some of the other things that's associated with the European lifestyle. Now you've brought it's an additional resource in terms of having a book where African-American children can now take a look at someone that looks like them and have an experience that they can relate to, which would be going to the barbershop. And yes, that is a significant experience that you'll hear many parents talk about the first time they took their son to the barbershop, what have you. So as you were now coming up with the concepts or going through what was that like for you?
It was brand new for me, and I had no idea how I was going to go about taking this idea and turning it into a story. But I used a lot of my experience as a speech pathologist for developing the character of Liam. And I used my brother and his barbershop and a lot of other barbers. I used all of that for making sure that I was authentic. And I wanted to speak from a very authentic place when I wrote this book, because I wanted it to feel good to the readers. And I wanted people to be able to feel like they were being seen and heard and represented, not just the children, but also the adults who might be reading this book to them. So I wanted to make sure that I had done good research and that I was making sure that it was reflective of people's true experiences. I don't have a son, so I don't know exactly what that feels like when you're taking your son to the barbershop, but I talked to a lot of dads, and I wanted to make sure that I was authentic with how I represented Liam, because I don't think we mentioned it to your listeners, but Liam is autistic. And I did that as well because there just isn't enough visibility for children with special needs when it comes to books. But also I want to normalize what that looks like. I think when you think autism, people always think of one particular part of the spectrum. You think of someone who is doing a lot of stereotypical behaviors, but that's not always the case. And I wanted to normalize not only what it looks like to be a Black child, but also what it looks like to be a Black child who has special needs. And I just took my time with character development from Liam to the dad and also the barber. Those are the three main characters that I put the most energy into because they were very focal for this story.
So you're absolutely right. As a matter, I did touch on it in whenever I was reading your bio, but it says Shontaye weaves together the beauty of fatherhood, community, and neurodiversity as Liam, an autistic Black. Now, those are a lot of issues. Those are a lot of issues, particularly to tackle in one book, which is and the best way, particularly again from the African perspective, and I think this one may cut across regardless, but the best way to get information across is through story. So the fact that Shontaye has now blended autism, community, family, with special focus on fatherhood and the young Black child, the African-American boy. That's, I take my hat off for you for doing that, because it is certainly needed. And again, as the storyteller, it sounds like, and I haven't had the opportunity to read the book yet, but I will, but it sounds like not only would the person listening to the story learn something, but the person reading the book would learn something.
Yeah, that was my intention, that the reader, whether it was a classroom teacher, a parent, a caregiver, a grandparent, that you would learn something new as well. And I've said it many times, because yes, this is a book that features a Black character, but this is not a Black book. I didn't write this book solely to give representation to Black children. I also wrote this book for non-Black children to see a Black child as the star of a story and to see a Black family that's being featured prominently, because that's equally as important to me, that not only do I give representation to Black and brown children, but also I give the experience of non-Black children of seeing what our experiences look like too, because that's the way that we normalize it, and that's the way that we help children to become more aware of our diverse society, and we encourage children and adults to interact together when we're showing these positive experiences. Absolutely.
See, that's why Akbar's quote leaps out at me so much, because exactly what you just said. It's not necessarily, how did you say that say that again? Because, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. How did you say about it not just being a Black book? Say that again.
It's not only a Black book, it's also a book for non-Black children and non-Black adults, because it's important for our Black children to have representation, but it's equally important for non-Black folks to have that experience of seeing what our lives look like and understanding that sometimes the Black child or the Black adult can be the star of the story. Anyone can be the star and anyone can be the villain.
Absolutely. That's the important piece. And that's what Akbar is talking about, that we must learn to comfortably celebrate ourselves. There are a lot of people, and again, based on history and socialization, they really struggle with celebrating their culture or their ethnicity or their race. Because what we have is, and what we have had, and why this is why you were having the issue with resources to begin with, is because for Caucasians, Europeans, their greatness is in front of them at all times. Everywhere we go, everywhere we look, left, right, up, down, whether it's in literature or whether it's in what have you, it's smack in front of them. but other groups have contributed just as much, if not more, except for it's not exhibited and constantly placed in front of them. So as you just said, even though the characters in this book, they're African American characters, it does not mean that the book is only for African Americans, because it's been the reverse for us for hundreds of thousands of years, in terms of we're always faced with European or Caucasian characters and very little exposed to characters who look like us. So if you were to go through resources, up until lately, if you were to now look historically, you would think that no one else had an experience but Europeans. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're now introducing a book at that level, because the truth be told, no baby born comes out prejudiced or racist. All right. No, that's learned. All of that is learned behavior around the dinner table. All that's learned from body language and word choice. And that's learned behavior, because if you put a bunch of 6-month-old babies in a circle of various races and ethnic backgrounds, and you put a ball in the middle of that circle, the only thing they worrying about is, can they all get to that ball and kicking it back and forth to each other or rolling it back and forth to each other? They could care less that the person beside them is dark, or the person beside them is light, or the person beside them has hair or no hair. Babies don't care about that. They don't learn that behavior until they've sat around the dinner table and they've heard adults talking about the other races. Or an adult comes in and says, you can't be friends with him or her because they're dark skin or they're light skin or they're this or they're that. Or now to your point of talking special needs, because while I'm focusing on race, you have other type of prejudices and isms as well now with somebody who has autism. Someone who has I told you earlier, my mother stuttered for a time. I used to get teased for that by my friends as a kid, because when my mother was trying to say something to me, if they heard her stuttering, now they would laugh at me and tease me about my mom stuttering. So you have kids who have special needs who now get ostracized and teased as well.
And it's also learned due to visibility and invisibility. Like you said, babies aren't born racist, but by 6 months of age, research has said by 6 months of age, babies can start to recognize differences in race and gender. They can tell the difference based upon what they're seeing. And as they grow older, if you're only showing your children experiences of white families, if they're only seeing pictures of white children in their books, if those are the only stories that you're telling and you're not talking about anyone else, they start to feel like those people are only secondary to their life when they do exist.
Correct. We were... Shontaye and I were talking about the increased awareness or increased spotlight on the historically black colleges and universities. We know them affectionately as HBCUs, particularly since Kamala Harris was now vice president, and she, on her undergrad days, were at Howard University. And so Howard University is a HBCU, and again, historically black college and university. And where I'm going with this is there's an increased spotlight on them, but every college, as you know, is not an HBCU. You have HBCUs and you have the colleges and universities that are not. In many of the colleges and universities, if it's not an HBCU, and if it's in Middle America, if it's out in the Midwest or what have you, and you happen to be African American and might be going to one of those schools, you could come across, based on what Shontaye just said, not having been exposed to anybody who don't look anything like you. You still, in 2020, will come across someone that might, say, I'm looking for your tail. And you're like, what are you talking about? As far as the last thing they knew was every African American had a tail like a monkey. And there are real cases of that. There are cases of, African Americans who've gone to school in a Midwestern school, either a school that's predominantly European, Caucasian, has never interacted or been around African Americans or any other color, that they're literally looking for some of this stupid stuff like, I was always told that you have a tail like a monkey. So if you're not exposed to other races and to other religions, to other ethnic groups, you really wouldn't know. But at the same time, the fact that those who control the media and the literacy and all that kind of stuff, if they're only showing one way, not for nothing, that is all you would know. And a lot of that is done by design. All that is done consciously. All that is done intentionally. So now and this is where the whole Afrocentricity thing comes in. We now have to intentionally and consciously say, okay, fine, that's what you want to do, great, but I'm going to do the same thing for our folks. Mm-hmm. And that's where, earlier you said, you were talking about it and people were saying, well, you know what, you ought to write your own book. Absolutely. Because see, that's where Afrocentricity comes in. It's one thing to say this is how things ought to be. It's another thing to take the bull by the horn and say, I'm going to do it. And that's where I kind of see you coming in, Shontaye, in terms of you took the bull by the horn and now you wrote a resource, Liam's First Cut, to do exactly the things that you've been talking about over the last 40 minutes or so.
I did. I wanted to add to that. It's like you said earlier that it's getting better these days. That when that Christmas song was produced, it was probably minimal, if any, images or shows or books that featured children of color. But even today, as of 2019, there still just isn't enough. Our children only make up about 12% of children's books where they're being featured as the main character. 12%. That's really low. And the numbers are even lower when you're looking for an Asian main character or Hispanic main character.
Correct.
That's really startling for us to be here in 2019 and we still see predominantly only white children and animals. That's the next group that's featured the most when it comes to children's books. So that's what our kids are seeing all the time. They're seeing that only white kids are the star, or they're seeing an animal that has human characteristics, but then there's nothing else. And it all made sense to me. It made sense to why when I work I'm in a part of New Jersey where I work where it's not predominantly black, but it's not predominantly white either. And some children are new here, they're first generation Americans, but they haven't encountered a black person. Even though they have brown skin, it's not quite the brown as my brown. So they want to touch my skin because they've never been exposed to anything like that. They've never been in the presence of a person who has natural, coily textured hair. And they're in awe of that. And it's innocent, but it doesn't feel like it's innocent when you make a comment to another child. They don't know what that means. They internalize that as something negative about them because you're treating them like a spectacle.
Correct.
So how do we correct that? We correct that by showing our kids, whether you are in a school that's all white, or if you're in a school that's all Hispanic, or if you're in a school that's all black, you have to tell different stories. None of our children are going into a world that will be solely made up of one group. So we prepare them best by showing them all different types of races, cultures, religions, even different family structures or types of living. I found that there were people who made assumptions that if you don't live in a house, you must be poor because you live in an apartment.
Right.
I tell you, there's some folks who have apartments that cost way more than 5 houses.
That's right. That's absolutely. You go over to New York. You're talking about $9,000-$10,000 a month rent for an apartment, like you said, that would outdo any house.
Yes, yes. So when we show them all of these differences, that's when we open up their minds to understanding that it's not a single lane, that there are many different types of stories out there, and you're going to encounter them, and you'll be able to interact with them better. Not just tolerate them, but interact with them, respect them, and appreciate them.
Absolutely. And see, it's funny to hear you say, because I was sharing a story about the monkey's tail, but now you were saying like that whole notion of just not even seeing the skin color whatsoever and marveling at it. Like, oh my God, and you're right. As an adult, you're kind of like, or you might be taken aback. But as a child, they do process differently. So they do process that as something negative. The fact that you, again, with the barbershop, with the cultural experience, with the Afrocentric experience, the fact that hair is even involved at all, because again, hair is a big thing in the African American community. Whether it's male or female, hair is a major issue. So in terms, at the barbershop, because see, I'm bald. I've been bald now for 10, 15 years or what have you. But at one point I did have hair, and then you did want to have it cut whatever the latest style was, whether it was the fade, whether it was a shag, whether it was, and I know now with the boys, they go and they get those little specific cuts and designs in their hair. I mean, the barber is really good because they can take that clipper and cut just about anything you want in there, whether it's letters or designs or symbols or whatever. I mean, and so it's very significant. But if you look historically, if you go back and look at Africa, and if you look at we've always had that. That's in our ancestry. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you hit on that, and again, folks need to understand, and I said it a couple of minutes ago, in terms of if we are being, and if these conversations appear to be pro-black, that doesn't mean we're anti-white. I have absolutely, for the most part, no issues with. My issue is you having an issue with me because I'm black. I don't have an issue with you because you're white or you're European, but I do have an issue with you having an issue with me because I'm African American. And therein lies the issue, wherein that's why, resources are not, again, because it all depends on who owns it, who owns the companies. I mean, all this is by design. All this is, it's intentional. Trust me on that. Folks may not realize it, but it is. Groups were intentionally left out of history. Groups were intentionally left out of their contribution. Groups were intentionally left out of being stars of the book or stars of the movie. Even in movies where the character in reality was African American, in many cases, a European actor or actress was put in the role. Like when you can start getting into the Cleopatras and all this, that, and the other, characters who were black, had to be black, couldn't be anything else but black based on the region of the world they were in, were now portrayed by a Caucasian actor or actress. I mean, so that's just straight up whitewashing, no pun intended. Straight up whitewashing. So when you get now, folks, and a lot of my authors that come on the show are doing exactly what you're doing. They're intentionally putting people who look like them at the forefront, or the people that they serve. And as you said, there is nothing wrong with the other groups being exposed to that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with an all European Caucasian audience being exposed to Liam's First Cut.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I received one of the cutest pictures and stories from a family who purchased my book, a white mom and dad, and they have a son who, I think he was about 2 or 3, and he had been going to get haircuts, but his mom had been taking him to a salon to get his hair cut, and they usually cut his hair with scissors. They received my book in the mail. They read the book together, and the little boy loved the book so much he wanted to read it again as a bedtime story when his dad got home from work. So when they all read the book together, after the little boy went to sleep, the husband said to the wife, you know I'm taking him to the barbershop now. Like, that's it. I've been waiting so long to get him a fade. We're not doing this little cute cutsy thing at the salon anymore. He's going to get a fade. They sent me a follow-up photo. He went and got a fade the following Saturday, and now that's their Saturday routine. So he doesn't go with the mom anymore. The dad and the son go to the barbershop, and he gets his fade. And I thought, what a beautiful testament to this book.
Absolutely.
This non-black family still related to the content, and now the father and the son, they have their own experience that they'll share, and they're starting their own traditions too. And the dad related. He understood because the barbershop was important to him too, and he couldn't wait to get his son in the barbershop. So that was beautiful to me, but it also shows, like I said, that it's not just a black book. It's a book for anybody.
Correct. And as well, I see this is what kind of like boggles my mind, and I guess that kind of gets my first standing on it. Is like, that's the way it ought to be. This whole thing of it having to be one way has always irked me, because I have no problem with saying, none at all, that I'm a proud African American male. Wouldn't want to be any other color, but I don't have a problem with a Caucasian man saying I'm a proud Caucasian. I don't have a problem with that. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, where the rub comes in is the fact that you have a problem with me being who I am and wanting me to be you. Like, no, I don't want to be you, and I don't want you to be me. I want each of us to be who we are. So now, after reading your book, the father says, okay, not only, because again, I don't know in the testimony whether mom had been taking the little boy to the barbershop or not, and dad saying, this is a wonderful opportunity, I'm going to be the one to do it now. But again, you've created a bond or a different experience that really, even though it is an African-American experience for us, but the father-son experience can be created regardless of if you're Hispanic, if you're African-American, if you're Caucasian, if you're Asian, the father-son experience can be created regardless. So even if nothing else they got out of the book but that, then that is powerful. It really is. That was a powerful testimony. And again, and that's exactly the way, I'm glad to hear that testimony, because that's exactly the way it ought to be, that, anybody's inspired regardless. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a guest on and we were talking about this. Now, Cosby is what Cosby is or whatever. I mean, I think there's some interesting issues there too, particularly in light of everything that our leader has done. I was saying the other day, there ought to be a cell right next to Cosby for Trump, but that's another discussion. But in any event, Cosby is what Cosby is in terms of the show. And you don't know how many times I would hear, oh, that's cute, but that's not reality. You wouldn't get a black doctor and a black lawyer and an intact family, mom and dad together. When the truth of the matter is, no. There's more than that than you would think. It's just not shown. Right.
But when it's not shown, you assume that that's not the reality.
Correct. When it's not that bingo. If you're not exposed to it, if you've never seen it, then you would think it doesn't exist.
And as a child, you think that that's not a possibility for you.
Correct.
You feel like that's limited to only folks that look a certain way, or only that career is limited to certain folks, because you're never seeing yourself in that position. You don't even begin to think that that's a possibility for you or for your life.
Absolutely. And see, that's why, and it's sad, yet still in 2020, we're still talking about first this, first that. However, that's why such a big deal, particularly for African-American little girls and Indian little girls and Jamaican little girls and everything that Kamala is made up of. That's why it is so significant, and a lot of ads and a lot of, social media things have been geared toward now little girls can look up and see, I have an opportunity to be vice president because Kamala Harris is there. And you're right. If you've never, and see, listening audience, you have to think in terms of the mind of a child. Right now, take the adult hat off and think in terms of a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old who is processing things. Kids process differently than adults do. So the way we would be able to process, and based on all of our experiences and everything we know, we can put information together and come up with, a conclusion. Kids don't process that way. So just like you heard Shontaye say, what this kid sees all the time is what they're going to see as the reality. So if the only thing they see are Caucasian kids, what crosses their mind is, well, no one in there looks like me, so I guess that doesn't happen for me. So now we get into self-esteem issues. There's so many things that goes on in kids' minds in terms of self-esteem and confidence and dreams and goals and everything else, that why Liam's First Cut and books like that are so critical. All right.
When I talk with professionals, especially folks who work in school settings, I talk too about the need for showing more than just books that show oppression and struggle.
Correct.
If you're in the classroom and all you ever show your black students are books about the lives of African Americans being defined by oppression and struggle, they start to believe that that's all that their life will be defined by as well. Kids need books that are just happy books. And that was also something I was very intentional about. I wanted this book to be a book about a kid doing things that kids do. And I wanted you to see a kid that was just happy to spend some time with his dad and excited about something, looking forward to something. Folks, I encourage all the time to take inventory of your library, especially classroom teachers. Do you have books about black folks being the main character? But if so, are they only about enslavement? Are they only about civil rights leaders that kids don't always relate to because it seems like it was so long ago? I remember showing my students the story because their teachers will always focus on Ruby Bridges and her story. But what I wanted them to see is that she's not someone that's long gone and dead. She's still alive and living. And a lot of my students were saying, like, oh, she's probably the same age as my grandma. I'm like, yeah. So this is probably how life was when your grandma was a little girl. And
Correct.
That helps them to relate a little bit better. But oftentimes when we're only focusing on civil rights and we're only pulling out books during Black History Month, we're doing a disservice to our students.
Absolutely.
We're not showing them the full spectrum of the life of a black person or a person of color. We shouldn't always limit our stories of indigenous people to only being secondary to Pilgrims and Thanksgiving, which we know that story is not accurate. We need to show them all of the culture and all of the richness of the culture as well, because that's when children are able to see themselves as a lot more than just being defined by that struggle, that oppression, and sadness and misery. There's way more to our lives than that. So I love to show when I'm highlighting other authors' work, I try to find children's books that celebrate that black boy joy, that black girl joy, and that's what I wanted for Liam as well.
There is a book that I literally just finished reading, and it was written by the chairman of the Department of African American or Black Studies down at Temple University. His name is Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. And the title of the book, and you've heard me say the word a couple times during the interview, is Afrocentricity. And in that book, Dr. Asante says exactly what you just said, that we have to, as we understand our slave experience, there's no question that happened, and we need to be proud of that, own that. But at the same time, we need to start talking victory. We need to talk in terms of how we've overcome so many things, even to get to where we are now. We need to start talking in terms of victory and not always in poverty. Secondly, there's a video, and I'm going to email it to you because when we're done, at some point, you give me, I think I have your email already. In fact, I know I have it. I'm going to email you a link to a YouTube video of a young girl from Africa. And I shared this with my boys this week at the school, where she says she was now looking for pictures just to see how are African children portrayed. She said every picture she looked and found was a picture of an African child in poverty. And she goes on to say how that's a lie. She said, we're not the poster children for poverty. And I'm going to send you that video because it's only about maybe 10 minutes of that African girl. I forget which part of Africa, but she goes on to say she went looking for pictures of African children. The only thing she could find was African children in poverty. She said, we are not, all of us out here are not in poverty. I don't understand, why are we always shown in that light? And to your point, a lot of times when we are in the other resources, like you said, it's in an impoverished position or a secondary position.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So let's talk.
I'd love to see that video.
Oh, I'm going to send it to you. Matter of fact, there's two videos that I worked with my boys this week. And one was the Dr. Dre ad for Beats, his latest ad. And I share with folks, like, I'm not the biggest Dr. Dre fan, but I must take my hat off to him with that ad. And the title of the ad is Do You Love Me? And he gets into something like, just like what we're talking about here. He gets into the whole thing, how you all love our culture, but you don't love me as a person. You love what we do, even the whole barbershop experience. I'm so happy that family now is taking that on. But again, the loving of our culture in and of itself hasn't been an issue. And that's what Dre is getting at. But the loving of me as a human being, that's still an issue. So that's an ad and a video as well. But those two boys those two videos I exposed my students to this week to have them look at it and talk about it. What did you get at it? What do you think about that young lady saying, we're kings and queens, we're not all poverty? So I'm going to send both of those to you for, just to, to take a look at. Both of them are very short, but this work is so significant that that's why I immediately, whenever Reverend Aisha, told me about you and I saw what everything was about, I thought I got to get her on quickly. Talk to me a little bit about your organization, and then I'm going to turn the mic over to you and allow you to promote. But talk to me a little bit about the board you're on, the Smiles for Speech.
Smiles for Speech is a nonprofit that I just found them on social media. I came across their platform, and what they do is that they try to take intervention and resources to areas of the world where children have communication disorders, but they're lacking the resources. So there are areas in particular in Africa. I think last year we were supposed to go to Kenya, but of course COVID came and that changed everything. And then prior to that, Ghana, where there's only one speech language, I think it's called a speech language specialist there, but there's only one for the entire region. And many children go without having the intervention that they need. They don't necessarily have the equipment that they need. There are some children who have, as I mentioned before, as part of our scope, we also do swallowing and feeding as well. And there are some children who need specialized formulas, and the parents can't afford to get that product to be able to provide the nourishment for their child. So what Smiles for Speech does is they bring those resources to those communities for impoverished areas, and they also train individuals so they can continue the work when that group is gone. It consists of speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, We have a few volunteers from all over the world now who have also gotten involved. We're trying to help fund and create a library with professional resources, because even the schools don't have enough textbooks. And here we are in the U.S., we often have our textbooks and they're just sitting on our shelves after we stopped using them. But we felt like, I bet you if we did a program where we asked people to give up your used textbooks that you're no longer in need of and send them into us, a lot of folks would respond, and they did. And we were able to get tons of textbooks that we could send over to, those went to Ghana as well, to help fund their library and create a stronger program for the students who are studying to become therapists and provide intervention and resources. So I saw what they were doing, and at the time I couldn't go with them on the mission that they were preparing for, but I wanted to help. So I just raised some money to send money to help them with that task. And from there, I just stayed in relationship with them, trying to help where I could. And our next project will be in Kenya. Some things have been sent already, but we're planning to go there physically so that we can train, offer therapy. During the actual missions, they work with the students so that the folks there can see what's happening and try to model that afterwards. So we provide the intervention and also leave lots and lots of resources too.
So that's an organization that if I look that up on Google, their website and everything comes up?
Yes.
Okay.
Monsterspeech.org.
Okay.
They have their own website. You can donate to the organization. It is a nonprofit. You would receive a tax. Oh my goodness, the words are losing.
I know it. Tax deduction. I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. I know. So okay. So I'm definitely going to look them up whenever I get home, and then talk to me a little bit about Having Our Say LLC.
Having Our Say is my LLC, my business that I started not thinking it would become a business. So I mentioned before how I've always enjoyed working with children, but I also have always been committed to trying to give back to my community. And one day I was working in therapy, and I was so frustrated that child after child that I was seeing in the school setting didn't know how to play a board game. They didn't know how to look at the dice, see what number they got, and then count the spaces. And then I found the same thing with card games. They didn't understand the back and forth, that the turn taking, how to ask the right questions. So I wrote a Facebook post, and I said, folks, playing games is still important. Don't just let your kids play video games. There's a lot of value in teaching your children how to play board games, teaching your children how to play card games. And I started listing all the skills that you're working on and enhancing just by playing a board game, like cognitive skills, problem-solving skills, even math skills. And the response to that post was so great that I was taken aback. And it was mostly Black folks and Hispanic folks, people of color, who were like, I had no idea. I didn't know this is something I could do at home that's not just fun, but I'm actually helping my child. I started getting messages from people asking me for more tips and more resources, and I realized that there was a big gap between the information that we, the experts, the language experts have, and what the folks in the community needed to have. So Having Our Say started off as a blog. I started writing just to share those free resources and tips with people. And then from there, I started my private practice, where I was actually working with clients in their homes. And by working with them in their homes, I'm able to work with the family schedule at a time when it's more convenient for them, but also you're able to see what I'm doing so that you can carry over those strategies with your child when I'm home and continue the language development. And then from Having Our Say as the blog and the private practice, and I started doing the work with books and literacy and promoting books that feature children of color. And then now I'm in the author space. So it's all just been a natural evolution for me.
All right, well, that is a wonderful segue to the last piece of the interview, and that is I allow my guests to promote. You can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount, but anything short of that in terms of websites, telephone numbers, appearances, how folks can get in touch with you, anybody you want to shout out, anything. I'm going to turn the mic off for the next few minutes, and this is your opportunity to promote Taye Jones, to promote Shontaye. So I'm turning the mic off, and this is your promotion moment.
Hello, listeners. I am Shontaye Glover, and I celebrate the abilities of children. My book, Liam First Cut, it tells the story of Liam, an autistic boy getting his first haircut. And by the end of my story, you and your child will feel valued, you'll feel seen, and you will feel represented. My book is available through my website, tayejones.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram at Having Our Say. If you're looking for resources and information regarding language development, you can also visit my page, havinghoursay.org. I keep a host of information there for parents and caregivers and also other professionals to help you understand what communication should look like and what you can do to help improve communication skills. If you're interested in having me speak as a speaker, please contact me. You can find me again at tayejones.com or havinghoursay.org.
All right. Well, again, we will definitely be in touch because I'm going to get all this. This show will be up by tonight on my YouTube channel. So I'll get that to you as well as those other 2 videos and the link. And you can do whatever you would like with it. Once you receive them, they're yours. We will be in touch in terms of there's some other things that we might be able to do in terms of what you're doing in terms of Liam's First Cut. That is available. Is that available in ebook format as well?
It is available as an ebook, not through Amazon. The book itself is available through Amazon, but as far as an ebook, it's available with other e-readers. Okay. I know you can get it on Apple, like Apple iBook. Okay. It's available there too. Mm-hmm. All right. It's available online at Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and also my website, tayejones.com.
All right. Well, I mean, I just cannot probably put in the words how ecstatic I am of the work that you're doing and the need for it. And again, having just finished reading Afrocentricity and everything you're doing, like if you were to read that book by Dr. Shontaye, you would get a feel for what I'm talking about and an appreciation for why what I'm hearing out of you is exactly what his theory is in the book in terms of moving mindsets, in terms of shifting mindsets, because that's what really it is. It's about shifting the mindsets of people regardless of what ethnicity, regardless of what race. It is a shift in mindset of how we see things. And in that shift in mindset becomes a shift in lifestyles. So Afrocentricity becomes a way of life, not just something that we talk about. And you're putting it in action by what you're doing with the writing of the books, with your company, with the having our say, with being on that board, so forth. You're putting Afrocentricity in motion. All right. And that is so critical for people of African descent because of the way that things have been designed in terms of making it look and appear as if no contribution has been made by people of color. No contribution has been made by the gender female. No contribution has been made by anybody else other than folks who are from Europe. And that's just, as that African girl can say in that video, that's just a straight up lie. She's straight up. She said lies. Indeed. Right. So you are now dispelling and debunking these lies and these myths, and you're catching it at an age where it needs to be caught, is when they are children. All right. So I applaud you. As my mom can say, keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
And we will definitely be in touch. And I'll be in touch with Aisha as well, and let her thank her profusely for putting us together.
Yes, I will thank her as well. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to your listeners. It's been a great conversation.
It has. So you have a wonderfully blessed day, weekend, a great Christmas and Kwanzaa, and then New Year's or whenever, because like I said, I don't know when we're going to see each other in person, but, we'll see each other, emails and so forth and so on. But have a blessed Christmas and everything else that goes along with that. All right.
Yes, you as well. And stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Take care now.
Thank you. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Well, you all know what I'm about to say because I say it at the end of every episode. This ends another episode of The Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. And I am so proud of Taye. I don't know what to do. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation this morning because it is critical. More critical than one may know. And it may look like a cute little book about a boy going to the barbershop, but it's so much more. Same thing I was telling you about that Dre ad. It looked like a cute little video for some headsets, but it's so much more. All right. So with that being said, we're going to change over the hour.